The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the polished marble floor as James Sullivan adjusted his tool belt and stepped into the grand hallway of the Wellington mansion. His weathered work boots, still damp from the morning rain, squeaked softly against the pristine surface, a sound that seemed almost sacrilegious in such an elegant space. Third electrical panel on the left, the house manager had told him tersely before disappearing into some distant wing of the sprawling estate. Fix it and leave. Mr. Wellington values his privacy. James didn't mind. He preferred working alone anyway. At 42, he'd learned that solitude was often better company than most people. Besides, he had his daughter Maya waiting for him at home, and every hour of overtime meant one step closer to affording the school trip she'd been dreaming about for months. The mansion belonged to Richard Wellington, a pharmaceutical mogul whose company had revolutionized cancer treatment. James had read about him in the papers, a reclusive genius who'd withdrawn from public life after some personal tragedy. The kind of man who lived in a house with 23 rooms but occupied maybe 3 of them. James found the electrical panel easily enough. As he opened his toolkit and began examining the outdated wiring, his eyes wandered to the walls around him. Portraits, dozens of them arranged like a private gallery. Most showed Richard Wellington at various stages of his career, accepting awards, cutting ribbons, shaking hands with presidents. But it was the painting at the end of the corridor that stopped James cold. His screwdriver clattered to the floor. The portrait was enormous, nearly 6 feet tall, painted in oils that seemed to glow even in the dim hallway light. A young woman, perhaps 25, with auburn hair cascading past her shoulders. She wore an emerald green dress that matched her eyes, and her smile held a mixture of mischief and melancholy that seemed impossibly familiar. James walked toward it as if pulled by invisible strings. The brass nameplate at the bottom read, Sarah Wellington, 2016. But that was impossible, because the woman in this painting, this Sarah Wellington, looked exactly like someone James knew. Someone he saw every single day at Riverside Community Hospital. Claire, he whispered. Claire Anderson worked in the hospital's physical therapy department. She'd been there for 8 years, ever since the facility had found her unconscious by the highway with no memory of who she was or where she'd come from. Severe head trauma, they'd said. Retrograde amnesia. No identification, no missing person reports that matched. Nothing. The hospital had given her a name, Claire, after the nurse who'd found her, and a job, and slowly, carefully, she'd built a life from absolutely nothing. James had befriended her 3 years ago when Maya had broken her arm falling off the monkey bars. Claire had been Maya's therapist, patient and kind, making exercises feel like games. Afterward, they'd kept in touch. Coffee in the hospital cafeteria, occasional dinners, long conversations where Claire would talk about the strange emptiness of not knowing your own history. And now, staring at this portrait, James understood why she'd always seemed like someone from a different world. Because she was. Can I help you? James spun around. Richard Wellington stood in the doorway, tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive cardigan over dress shirt and slacks. His face was lined with the kind of grief that never fully fades, and his eyes held a wariness that suggested he rarely had unexpected company. I'm sorry, sir, James stammered. I was just, the electrical panel is right here and I saw the portrait and what? Richard's voice was sharp. James took a breath. This was insane. He was about to upend this man's entire world based on a resemblance. But looking at the portrait again, at the exact curve of the smile, the distinctive way the left eyebrow arched slightly higher than the right, the small mole just above the collarbone, he knew he was right. Sir, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think I know where your daughter is. The change in Richard Wellington was instantaneous and terrifying. His face went from stern to desperately hopeful in the space of a heartbeat. He gripped the doorframe as if his legs might give out. What did you say? The woman in this portrait, Sarah. She's at Riverside Community Hospital. She's been there for 8 years working as a physical therapist. She goes by Claire Anderson because she doesn't remember her real name. She doesn't remember anything. Richard moved forward so fast James instinctively stepped back. The older man's hands were shaking as he reached out, not to grab James, but to steady himself against the wall. Riverside? That's 300 miles from here. Yes, sir. She was found on Highway 47, unconscious, with severe head injuries. No ID. The hospital tried everything to identify her. But I was looking in all the wrong places, Richard finished, his voice breaking. I searched everywhere, hired investigators, offered rewards. I thought she'd left the country. I never imagined she was so close. He pressed both hands to his face, and James watched as 8 years of grief and hope and despair crashed over him like a wave. How do you know her? Richard finally asked, lowering his hands to reveal tears streaming down his face. A person, sir. Kind, patient, brilliant at what she does. Everyone at the hospital loves her. Tell me everything, Richard said hoarsely. Please, tell me about my daughter. I'm a maintenance worker at the hospital. My daughter Maya, she's 11, broke her arm a few years ago, and Claire was her physical therapist. We became friends. James paused, choosing his words carefully. She's an incredible. They moved to Richard's study, a room filled with leather-bound books and photographs. James sank into a chair that probably cost more than his car while Richard poured himself a drink with hands that still trembled. 8 years, Richard said quietly. 8 years. She's been 300 miles away. Can you tell me what happened? James asked gently. How she disappeared. Richard sat heavily behind his desk and pulled out a folder. Clearly something he'd looked at thousands of times, judging by the worn edges. Sarah was my only child, he began. My wife died when Sarah was 16. Cancer. After that, it was just the two of us. I threw myself into work, built Wellington Pharmaceuticals into what it is today. I told myself I was doing it for her, securing her future. He opened the folder to reveal newspaper clippings, police reports, private investigator summaries. But the truth is, I was running from grief, and Sarah paid the price. By the time she was 24, we barely knew each other. I was always traveling, always in meetings. She graduated from medical school, wanted to do humanitarian work in developing countries. I told her she was wasting her potential. Richard's voice cracked. We had a terrible fight. I said awful things. Told her she was being naive, that she didn't understand how the real world worked. She told me I'd forgotten what really mattered in life. He pulled out a photograph. Sarah standing in front of a medical school building, wearing scrubs, her face glowing with purpose. She left that night. Took her car, some clothes, maybe $5,000 from her savings. I thought she'd come back in a few days after she'd cooled off. But days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Her car was found abandoned at a gas station in Millbrook. That's about 200 miles from here. After that, nothing. She must have continued on foot or hitchhiked, James said softly. And somewhere along Highway 47, something happened. An accident? The doctors think so. She had a skull fracture, broken ribs, internal bleeding. Someone found her unconscious by the roadside and called 911. But she had no identification, no phone. And when she woke up months later, she had no memory. Richard stood and walked to the window, staring out at manicured gardens that suddenly seemed meaningless. For 8 years, I've blamed myself. Every single day. I've walked through this house calling her name, half crazy with grief. I've funded missing persons organizations, helped other families find their children, hoping that somehow, some way, I'd find mine. You can find her now, James said. She's alive, Mr. Wellington. Your daughter is alive. Richard turned, and James saw something he'd never forget. Pure, undiluted hope breaking through years of darkness. Will you take me to her? Will you help me bring my daughter home? James called the hospital from Richard's study, his heart pounding. Physical therapy department, this is Claire. Her voice, warm, familiar, hit him with new weight now that he knew who she really was. Hey Claire, it's James. James, how's the fancy mansion gig going? Fixed any solid gold electrical panels yet? He smiled despite his nerves. Listen, I need to talk to you about something important. Something I discovered today. The levity left her voice. Okay, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very, very right. But it's going to sound insane. James, you're scaring me. He took a breath. Claire, I found out who you are. I found your family. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Claire? Are you there? I'm here. Her voice was barely audible. What do you mean? Your name is Sarah Wellington. You disappeared 8 years ago after an argument with your father. You were trying to find your own path, and somewhere along the way you had an accident. Your father, Richard Wellington, he's been searching for you this entire time. He never stopped looking. He heard her breathing change. Rapid, shallow, on the edge of hyperventilation. How do you know this? I'm at his house right now doing electrical work. There are portraits of you everywhere. It's you, Claire. Same eyes, same smile, even the same small scar on your chin. The timeline matches perfectly. I have a father. Her voice broke on the word. I have family. Yes, and he wants to see you. But we wanted to prepare you first. This is overwhelming, I know. She was crying now, he could hear it. James, I'm terrified. What if I meet him and don't remember anything? What if I'm not who he wants me to be? Then you'll figure it out together, James said firmly. He doesn't want Sarah from 8 years ago. He wants to know the person you are now. And Claire, you're amazing. You're compassionate and brilliant, and you've built an incredible life from nothing. When? She whispered. When does he want to meet me? Whenever you're ready. Tomorrow, next week, whenever feels right. Tomorrow, she said decisively. Tell him I want to meet him tomorrow. James. Yeah. Will you be there? Please. I'll be right there with you. I promise. Richard Wellington's private plane touched down in Riverside at 9 a.m. James waited at the small airport with Maya, who'd insisted on coming. Daddy, is Miss Claire really a secret princess? Maya asked for the 100th time. Not a princess, sweetie. But she does come from a very wealthy family. Will she still be nice when she remembers she's rich? James hugged his daughter close. She'll always be nice. That's who she is, no matter what she remembers. Richard emerged from the plane looking like he hadn't slept. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, probably the most casual clothes he owned. James noticed his hands shaking as they shook hands. Thank you for being here, Richard said. I don't think I can do this alone. They drove to the hospital in silence heavy with anticipation. Maya sat in the back, unusually quiet, sensing the gravity of the moment. Claire was waiting in the small garden behind the physical therapy wing, a space she'd helped create with donated plants and painted benches. She stood with her back to them, staring at a fountain, her shoulders tense. Claire, James called softly. She turned slowly. She dressed carefully. A simple blue dress, her hair down, minimal makeup, but her eyes were red from crying, and her hands twisted together nervously. Richard stopped walking, frozen 10 feet away, just staring at her. Sarah, he breathed. Claire took a tentative step forward. I'm sorry I don't remember you. Don't apologize. Richard's voice cracked. Please never apologize. I'm the one who's sorry. For the fight. For the terrible things I said. For not finding you sooner. They stood there, two strangers who should have been family, separated by 8 years of lost memories and accumulated pain. It was Maya who broke the stalemate. She walked straight up to Claire and held out a small potted plant. Miss Claire, my daddy says you might be sad because you can't remember your old family, but that's okay because now you have a new old family. And families give each other gifts, so I brought you this. It's a forget-me-not. Claire laughed through her tears, accepting the plant with trembling hands. Thank you, Maya. That's perfect. She looked up at Richard, really looked at him, and something flickered in her eyes. Not quite recognition, but something deeper. Cellular memory, perhaps. The body remembering what the mind had forgotten. Can we sit? She asked. Can we just talk? They sat on the painted benches, Richard and Claire on one, James and Maya on another nearby but giving them space. And slowly, carefully, Richard began to tell his daughter who she'd been. He showed her photographs on his phone. Sarah at age 5, covered in mud from helping in the garden. Sarah at 12, winning a science fair. Sarah at 18, graduating high school as valedictorian. Sarah at 24, in her medical school graduation photo, eyes shining with purpose. You wanted to join Doctors Without Borders, Richard said. You said you didn't want to just treat disease, you wanted to treat inequality. You wanted to go where help was needed most. Claire touched the screen, tracing the younger version of her face. I teach free physical therapy classes on weekends now, for people who can't afford treatment. I don't know why, but it always felt important. Because that's who you are, Richard said softly. That's who you've always been, even without the memories. The core of you, your compassion, your drive to help, that survived. Tell me about my mother, Claire asked quietly, and Richard did. He talked about his wife Elizabeth, about her laugh and her terrible cooking and the way she'd sing off-key while doing laundry, about how Sarah had inherited her mother's sense of justice and her inability to walk past anyone in need. You were 19 when she died, Richard said. You insisted on being in the room at the end, holding her hand. You told her it was okay to let go, that you'd take care of me. And you tried. God. You tried so hard to keep our family together while I fell apart. I'm sorry I left you alone, Claire whispered. I'm sorry I gave you no choice, Richard replied. I'm sorry I was so obsessed with my grief that I couldn't see yours. I'm sorry I tried to control your future instead of supporting your dreams. They talked for hours. Richard told stories, showed videos, shared memories. Some sparked nothing in Claire's mind. Others triggered fleeting sensations, a familiar smell, a sense of déjà vu, the ghost of an emotion. I remember a song, Claire said suddenly. Someone singing You Are My Sunshine, but getting the words wrong on purpose to make it funny. Richard's face crumbled. Your mother. She always sang it to you at bedtime, but she'd substitute ridiculous words. You are my potato, or you are my dishwasher. You are my elephant, Claire whispered, and then gasped. I remember that. I remember laughing. I remember. She pressed her hands to her temples. It's like looking through fog. I can see shapes but not details. That's okay, Richard said quickly. That's more than okay. We have time now. All the time in the world. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Richard extended his stay in Riverside, renting a suite at the nicest hotel in town. Every day he'd spend hours with Claire, showing her photos, telling stories, simply being present. Specialists were consulted. The consensus was that Claire's memories might return partially or not at all. The trauma had been severe and 8 years was a long time. But the emotional connections, those were forming new, based on who they were now rather than who they'd been. It's strange, Claire told James one evening in the hospital cafeteria. I look at these photos and intellectually I know that's me. But emotionally, it feels like I'm learning about a character in a book. She's real, but she's not present. Maybe that's okay, James suggested. Maybe you don't need to recover Sarah to build a relationship with your father. He wants me to come home to Wellington Estate, Claire said quietly. He says I'll have access to the best doctors, the best care. My old room is exactly as I left it. What do you want? I don't know. She twisted her coffee cup. Riverside is the only home I've known. The hospital, my apartment, you and Maya, my therapy clients. This is my life. But he's my father. Don't I owe him a chance? You don't owe anyone anything, James said firmly. This has to be your choice, based on what you want, not what you think you should want. What if I choose wrong? Then you'll choose again. Claire, you've rebuilt yourself from nothing once. If you need to, you can do it again. She reached across the table and took his hand. When did you become so wise? Single parenthood. It teaches you that there are no perfect choices, just honest ones. But James's heart was breaking, because he knew what he hadn't said out loud, even to himself. He was in love with Claire, had been for over a year, and the thought of her leaving, of losing her to a life he could never be part of, was devastating. 2 months after the reunion, Richard made a proposal. Come home for a trial period, he suggested. 3 months. Stay at the estate, meet the staff who remember you, see if being in those spaces helps the memories return. If it doesn't feel right, you can come back to Riverside. No pressure. Claire looked at James. They were in his small apartment, Maya doing homework at the kitchen table while they talked in the living room. What do you think? She asked. What could he say? That he wanted her to stay? That the thought of 3 months without her felt unbearable? That Maya talked about her constantly, that she'd become essential to their small family? I think you should try, he said instead. You deserve to know that part of your life. Will you visit? You and Maya. If you want us to. James. She moved closer, her voice dropping. Of course I want you to. She paused, seeming to struggle with words. You're important to me. Both of you. You're important to us too. They stood there, so close he could smell her floral shampoo, see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. This was the moment. He should tell her, should be brave enough to say that he loved her, that he wanted to be part of whatever life she chose. But Maya called out about a math problem, and Claire stepped back, and the moment passed. She left for Wellington Estate the following week. Richard sent a car, a sleek black sedan that looked comically out of place on James's street. Maya cried when Claire hugged her goodbye. You're coming back, right? Maya asked, her face pressed against Claire's shoulder. I don't know, sweetie, but I promise we'll still talk all the time. Okay? After the car pulled away, Maya looked up at James with the particular wisdom of children. You should have told her you love her, Daddy. It's complicated, Maya. Adults always say that when they're being scared. She wasn't wrong. Claire called every evening. Those calls became the highlight of James's day. It's overwhelming, she said on the first night. The house is huge. I keep getting lost. And there are pictures of Sarah everywhere, me, but it doesn't feel like me. Give it time. My old room is like a museum. Everything preserved exactly as I left it. Academic awards on the walls, medical textbooks on the shelf, photos with people I don't recognize. It's like walking through someone else's life. Is your father okay? He's trying so hard. Too hard, maybe. He keeps hoping that showing me things will trigger memories. And sometimes it does, little flashes. But mostly, I just feel guilty that I can't give him what he wants. What do you want, Claire? Silence. Then, quietly, I miss Riverside. I miss my work. I miss you and Maya. James's heart clenched. We miss you too. But as weeks passed, Claire's calls became less frequent. Not because she wanted to talk less, but because her days were filling up. Doctor's appointments, specialists, physical therapy sessions designed to help recover memories. Old family friends coming to visit, telling stories, showing photos. I'm starting to remember more, she told him on week 3. Not full memories, but impressions. The garden here, I remember playing in it as a child. The piano in the music room, I remember my mother teaching me. It's like puzzle pieces without a full picture. That's progress. Is it? Or is it just my brain creating false memories based on what people tell me? Does it matter? If the memories feel real, if they help you connect with your father, does it matter how they formed? I suppose not. On week 6, Richard called James directly. "I want to thank you," Richard said, "not just for finding Sarah, but for being her friend. She talks about you constantly. You and Maya. She's special to us. I can tell. And I wanted to ask, would you and Maya consider coming for Thanksgiving? It would mean a lot to Sarah. And honestly, to me as well. You're part of her life now. Part of her story." So, James and Maya flew to Wellington Estate for Thanksgiving. Their first time on a private plane, which delighted Maya to no end. The mansion was even more imposing in person. James felt completely out of place in his JCPenney suit walking through halls filled with priceless art. But Claire's face when she saw them made everything worth it. "You came," she breathed, pulling them both into a hug. "Of course we came." Thanksgiving dinner was surreal. Just the 4 of them at a table that could seat 20, served by staff who seemed to materialize and disappear silently. But Claire insisted on helping cook, and Maya charmed everyone with her stories, and slowly, it began to feel less like a formal occasion and more like family. After dinner, Claire gave them a tour of the grounds. They walked through gardens that would be spectacular in summer, past a pool house bigger than James's entire apartment, through a library that made Maya gasp with joy. "Do you think you'll stay?" James asked when Maya ran ahead to explore. Claire stopped walking. "I don't know. I'm starting to feel connections here. My father and I were building something. Not the relationship we had before, but something new. He's different than I imagined. Softer. He listens now. But I miss my life in Riverside. I miss my work, my independence, feeling useful. Here I'm a project. Everyone is so focused on helping me remember that they forget I'm a person with my own life now." "What does your father say?" "He says he just wants me to be happy. That if Riverside makes me happy, I should go back. But I can see how much he wants me to stay." They stood in the moonlit garden, and James felt the words rising in his throat again. "I love you. Come home. Not to this mansion, but to Riverside, to us." But before he could speak, Richard appeared on the terrace. "Sarah, we have visitors. Old family friends who heard you were home." And just like that, the moment passed again. 3 months became 4, then 5. Claire was remembering more: childhood summers, high school graduations, her mother's final days. But adult memories remained elusive. She didn't remember medical school, didn't remember the fight with her father, didn't remember leaving. "Maybe that's a blessing," she told James on one of their now weekly video calls. Maya was already asleep, so they talked late into the night like they used to in the hospital cafeteria. "How so?" "I get to rebuild my relationship with my father without the baggage of our past mistakes. We're both different people now. He's learned to listen, to respect boundaries. And I'm learning who I am when I'm not defined by memory loss." "That sounds positive." "It is. But James," she paused, "I've been accepted to the teaching program at Riverside Community College. I applied months ago before I knew who I was. Full scholarship to get my physical therapy degree formally recognized and start teaching." "Claire, that's incredible. I start in January. If I go. My father suggested I could teach here instead. He'd fund a state-of-the-art facility, pay top dollar, attract the best students. I could have everything I want right here. But it wouldn't be mine. It would be his money, his influence. And I've spent 8 years building a life from nothing. I'm proud of that. I don't want to lose it. So come back." "It's not that simple. He's my father, James. I've lost so much time with him. How do I choose between building a new life and reclaiming an old one?" James took a breath. This was it. If he didn't say something now, he'd lose her forever to a life of what-ifs and should-haves. Claire, I need to tell you something. I should have said this months ago, but I was scared. I'm still scared. But you deserve to know. James, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually. Claire, I love you. I've loved you for over a year. And I know I'm just a maintenance worker with nothing to offer compared to this life. But I love you. And Maya loves you. And if you come back to Riverside, it won't just be for school. You'll be coming home. To us. Silence. Complete, terrible silence. Claire, I love you too, she whispered. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. I thought maybe these feelings were just nostalgia for my Riverside life. But James, when I'm there at the estate surrounded by everything I could possibly want, I still feel empty. Because you're not there. You and Maya. You're what makes me feel whole. Then come home. I've been talking to my father about it. About wanting to live in Riverside, teach at the community college, build my own life. Do you know what he said? What? He said he spent 8 years searching for me. And now that he's found me, the last thing he wants is to lose me again by trying to make me into something I'm not. He said if teaching in Riverside makes me happy, then that's where I should be. He really said that? He did. And then he said that if there's someone special in my life, he was very pointed about that. He hopes I'm smart enough not to let them go. James laughed, feeling lighter than he had in months. So what are you saying? I'm saying I want to come home, to Riverside, to my job at the hospital, to my teaching program, to you and Maya. I'll visit my father regularly. He's offered to arrange flights whenever I want. But my life, my real life, is there. When? Next week. Classes start in January. But I want time to settle back in. James. Yeah. I'm scared. What if my memories never fully return? What if there's always this gap in who I am? Then we'll fill it with new memories. Better ones. Ones we choose together. Claire returned to Riverside on a crisp December morning. James and Maya waited at the small airport, holding a hand-painted welcome home sign Maya had spent 3 days making. When Claire emerged from the plane, she wasn't alone. Richard was with her, carrying her suitcase. I wanted to see where my daughter will be living, Richard explained. If that's all right. They drove to Claire's apartment, a modest one-bedroom that suddenly seemed very small next to the Wellington estate. But Richard didn't comment on the size or the worn furniture. Instead, he helped unpack, asked questions about her teaching program, and listened intently when Maya explained her latest art project. Later, while Maya showed Claire her room, Claire had become a frequent visitor before leaving, and Maya had decorated a corner just for her. Richard pulled James aside. Take care of her, Richard said quietly. Not because she's fragile, my daughter is one of the strongest people I've ever known, but because she's chosen you. And that choice? It's more valuable than anything I could ever buy. I will, sir. I promise. And James? Thank you. For finding her, for loving her, for giving her the space to choose her own path. You gave me back my daughter, but more importantly, you gave her back herself. After Richard left, promising to visit in 2 weeks, Claire and James sat on her small balcony watching the sunset. Are you happy? James asked. Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm more than happy. I'm home. Not because of a place or memories, but because of people. You, Maya, my father, you're my family. Everything else is just details. Your father is remarkable. He is. And I'm so grateful I get to know him as he is now. Maybe losing those memories was a gift in disguise. We get a second chance without all the old hurts. Do you still want to remember? Sometimes, but less than I used to. I'm learning that you don't need to know where you've been to know where you're going. James turned to face her. Where are you going? Wherever you and Maya are. He kissed her then, properly, without interruption, without fear. And for the first time in 8 years, everything felt exactly as it should be. The small chapel at Riverside Community Church was decorated with wildflowers. Claire's choice, because she'd learned she used to love them as a child. James stood at the altar in a suit Richard had insisted on buying, though it was tasteful and understated. Maya stood beside him as the flower girl, her dress a compromise between her desire for Princess Sparkly and Claire's preference for simple elegance. Richard walked Claire down the aisle, tears streaming openly down his face. When the minister asked who gave this woman in marriage, Richard's voice was clear and steady. I do. With gratitude, with joy, and with the knowledge that she's choosing her own path. The ceremony was small, just close friends, hospital colleagues, Maya's friends, and a few of Richard's closest associates. But it was perfect. During the reception in the church hall, decorated with more wildflowers and strung lights, Richard stood to give a toast. 8 years ago, he began, I lost my daughter because I thought I knew what was best for her. I thought I could plan her life, control her future. I was wrong. My Sarah, my Claire, she had to lose everything to find what mattered most. And in the process, she taught me what really matters too. He turned to James. You didn't just fix my electrical system that day. You gave me back something I thought was lost forever. Not just my daughter, but hope. The belief that even in our darkest moments, miracles can happen. To James and Claire, Richard raised his glass. May you always choose each other. May you build a life based on love, not expectations. And may you remember that the best journeys are the ones that bring us home. To James and Claire, the room echoed. Later, as they cut the cake, homemade by Claire's students, slightly crooked but made with love, Maya tugged on Claire's dress. Miss Claire, I mean Mom? Maya still struggled with the new title sometimes. Yes, sweetie? Are you happy? Claire knelt down to Maya's level. I'm more than happy. I have everything I've ever needed. A family who loves me, work that matters, and memories. New memories that I'll treasure forever. But what about your old memories? Maya asked seriously. Do you still want them back? Claire glanced at James, then at Richard chatting with hospital colleagues, then back at Maya. You know what? I have everything I need right here. The past made me who I am, but the present, this right now with all of you, this is what makes me complete. That night, after guests had left and Maya had fallen asleep in the car on the way home, James and Claire stood on her. Their balcony looking out at the city lights. Do you ever think about it? James asked. About how many things had to go exactly right for us to find each other? All the time. If your sister hadn't needed help with the funeral. If you hadn't taken that electrical job. If I hadn't had that accident 8 years ago. That's a dark way to look at it. Maybe, or maybe everything, even the painful parts, led me exactly where I needed to be. She turned to face him. I look at old photographs now, and I'm starting to remember more. Little flashes. But James, the woman in those photos, she's not me anymore. She was Sarah Wellington, define.